Wah 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 wah. Wah 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 wah. Wah 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 wah. Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. Once again, coming at you for a movie review, believe it or not. Today I'm coming at you to review the motion picture from 1973 by the name of Paper Moon. This movie, being directed by Peter Bogdanovich, is a movie that I saw for the very first time in the 90s, I think. Pretty sure I would have rented the Laserdisc of this title, probably from Video Update at the time. I remember liking the movie so much that I I recorded it on VHS off of the Laserdisc, which I would imagine it was either 1:8:5 widescreen, or I don't know what the official aspect ratio of this movie is. It might be more like a 1:6:6 ratio. I would imagine it's on Blu-ray. You could find out probably the preferred aspect ratio for the title if you looked up the Blu-ray release. I can only hope it's on Blu-ray. But I can remember, seeing this for the very first time in the 90s and falling absolutely head over heels. Well, maybe not that much, but, falling pretty much in, well, it's falling in love with it makes it sound really kind of goofy and scary. Liking this movie quite a bit at the time. It's funny how I never actually bought it, though, until I found this DVD sometime, looks like in 2009 for $3. Half price books here. I actually do have this, which is probably the very first DVD release of the film, which definitely gets the job done. But, at the time when I saw this for the very first time in the 90s, I was, already a huge fan of old movies and black and white and things like that. And it was really cool finding this at the time, because it was like, wow, not a whole lot of movies in the 70s, early 70s were necessarily being made in black and white. So to me, it like after the black and white era ended, it was always really pretty avant-garde for a movie to actually be filmed and released in black and white, particularly one as highbrow as this movie, being distributed by Paramount and everything like that back in the early 70s. This movie, if you don't know, takes place probably sometime in the 1940s in the South, in North America. Basically a tale about this orphaned little girl by the name of, I want to say it's like Addie Loggins or something like that, and this guy played by Ryan O'Neal just happens to come along to the movie. Basically starts with the small funeral for this young girl's mother, who was probably a prostitute, and just by chance, it's kind of goofy, like back in that day out in the boondocks and stuff, out in the country, and the Hickville-ness, that this guy would even learn that she had died and stuff in time to actually go and visit the funeral. But Ryan O'Neal's character, basically the movie starts with the funeral of this young girl's mother, and Ryan O'Neal's character showing up to pay respects as one of, obviously one of her customers, which stands, which begs a question which is actually pondered several times by a couple people throughout the course of this movie, because the character of, the little orphan girl's kind of got the same jaw as the Ryan O'Neal character, which is mentioned a couple times in the movie. So it's kind of like, it is kind of like a cool unspoken thing in the movie, like, within the movie, is the girl actually the daughter of the character that Ryan O'Neal plays? And interestingly enough, the daughter, or the young girl, is the real life daughter of Ryan O'Neal, the young girl of course being Tatum O'Neal herself. So it is really cool to actually see the father-daughter duo in this movie. So the premise of this movie is basically this girl, now being orphaned, is going to be shipped away to the only family she has remaining, and then the couple people at the funeral for her mom basically suggest that she hitch a ride with Ryan O'Neal's character. He basically feels very pressured and can't say no at the gravesite of, her mom and everything like that, so reluctantly takes the little girl along. And him being this shrewd businessman who does this thing where he scams people, he looks in the obituaries and finds recently widowed women, and goes to the door with, these phony baloney Bibles that he prints the widow's name on, and says that the late lost husband paid for this and now he's being delivered, but it's not paid for yet. So it's basically his way of making people buy things that wouldn't ordinarily buy things, because he put a little scam on there by saying that the recently dearly departed had gifted this to you. Trouble is, it's not paid for yet, so they can never turn the item down. It's really kind of a shrewd scam idea, and Holy crap. Kind of makes you not necessarily love this particular character, but the way they deal with it over the course of the movie, and where later on Eddie has some say in what happens, and if they go to a more of a poor looking house, she says it's paid for. If they go to more affluent looking house, she says it's cost a ridiculous amount of money, of which the affluent individual can pay for it with no problem whatsoever. So they kind of do a fun little twist on Ryan O'Neal's character's little scam early in the movie as the young orphan girl becomes a part of the situation. What's kind of funny is him being the scam artist he is early on in the movie, he goes and tries to scam like what? I can't remember if it's $1,000 or $2,000 off this one guy. Ends up getting $200 off him, and his intention at the time was he basically got this $200 because of the girl threatening this one guy. It was like a relative of the guy who killed her mom. I can't remember all the details, but he ends up getting $200 as a result of having this orphan girl along with him, kind of a threat, whatchamacallit, blackmail situation. And this little girl becomes aware of the fact that he got this $200 basically because of her, and her very shrewdly, which is another possible indicator that this character is in fact the biological daughter, could be very well the biological daughter of the Ryan O'Neal's character in the movie. It's kind of an interesting, subtle tell to that possibility. She basically, in a restaurant environment, raises her voice loudly and saying that you owe me that money, that $200 is because of me, you owe me that money. And his intention was to make the $200, fix up his car a little bit, and put her on a train to her family. But her basically threatening him in that public setting or whatever, I don't remember exactly why it means. I can't remember exactly why he decides to not ship her off on the train. It seems that part seems possibly a little unrealistic, but we'll let that slide. He does in fact not send her off on the train, but realizes early on to have her along to do as a pretty little face when he does these Bible sales scams door to door to recent widows and stuff, that it's actually quite the boon to his business. So they decide to kind of pair up as a scamming father, quote-unquote, daughter team, if you will. So that's the gist of the whole movie. The whole movie basically just follows their exploits for the number of days or weeks, however long this movie lasts, as they just go across, the country, just doing the part of the South, wherever this movie takes place, doing their door-to-door scams or whatever. And as the movie wears on, they're actually, for back then in the 40s or whenever this takes place, they actually make quite a decent amount of money in a relatively short period of time. And then later on, he ends up coming across this kind of, quote-unquote exotic dancer character played by Madeline Kahn, which is like, I think, a year before her appearance in the classic, beyond classic, childhood favorite film of mine by the name of Young Frankenstein. Madeline Kahn is fantastic in this movie. She possibly doesn't have quite enough material to really sink her teeth into this movie. For a Madeline Kahn part, maybe it's a little subdued compared to what she'd go on to do a year later in Young Frankenstein, but nevertheless it's fun to see 1970s Madeline Kahn as this kind of bimbo exotic dancer that Ryan O'Neal's character picks up along the way, and she's got a quote-unquote maid that, like a teenage black girl, the teenage black girl is actually really great. And there's a decent amount of sequences in this movie that take place in just one kind of extended shot, and there's this one conversation between Addie and this which is the orphan girl and maid, or whatever the hell Madeline Kahn calls her, in the rumble seat of this old vehicle. And it's just like, wow, it's one big take, one long take, and both of these young actresses really hold this scene really magnificently. And every moment that it continues to go on and doesn't cut to a different shot or different coverage and stuff, it's just like, wow. It's always really cool when they can just hold on a shot. You never see this in movies now, or at least obviously in mainstream commercial movies, but to just have a scene play out in one shot, it's just kind of like, it's fun how it almost gets stifling from second to second when there's not a cut. It's like, oh my God, are they going to be able to remember all these lines? But this movie is full of, a couple of instances like that where you just have scenes that take place in one shot. Very, very cool in that regard. In my opinion, though, when they meet up with the Madeline Kahn and her quote-unquote maid and stuff, the whole bit where the movie has to kind of like stop for basically, Addie and the quote-unquote maid of the Madeline Kahn character trying to scheme and scam their way together to basically, I don't think it really matters to the teenage quote-unquote maid, but Addie wants Madeline Kahn's character out of their hair because I don't know why. I guess, the Madeline Kahn's character takes away from, obviously takes the attention off her. So there's this part, maybe it's like an hour into the movie or something like that, where the two young women collude to basically get the Madeline Kahn character out of their hair, which of course happens. The movie would be absolutely, completely, amazingly fantastic. For me, giving it a rewatch recently, and when that scene came up, it's kind of like, that scene maybe is more interesting, them getting rid of the Madeline Kahn character, maybe a little more interesting upon the first viewing, but for multiple viewings, it's like, well, the outcome. It's kind of tedious to experience it upon repeat viewings, in my opinion. And then after that happens, their whole scamming lifestyle of the Ryan and Tatum O'Neal characters in this movie, it's kind of like resembles gambling. Like, you got to stop when you're ahead, and since by the time they get to halfway point to our part of this movie, it's like they're really riding high. They've got better part of $1,000 in cash in their little box that they keep it in, and they try to do this thing where they're going to scam this bootlegger out of, they're going to try to sell this bootlegger or whatever the hell he is some of his own booze, and that goes south because this guy's got a twin brother who's the sheriff of the town, and that gets him in trouble, and they end up losing basically all of their money because of that. And kind of by the end of the movie, it's the irony is, the character that Ryan O'Neal plays is back to where he pretty much started at the beginning of the movie, and actually arrives, throughout the course of the movie, he actually bought a really kind of a new nice car. He ends up losing that, ends up having to trade it so they can't trace him. He ends up being traced anyway, traded for this old piece of crap 20s truck or something like that. By the end of the movie, he drives in that crappy ass 20s truck, the Tatum character, to the family house or whatever, to drop her off with them. She doesn't want to go. He drops her off. There's this poignant kind of sad ending where earlier in the movie at a fair or something like that, like a county carnival or fair or something like that, the character of Addie wanted to take a picture in this little, paper moon thingamabob with the character that what Ryan O'Neal plays. He didn't want to do it because he's busy going through the adult, what you want to call it, exotic dancer tent over and over and over. So she has a picture taken of herself in that paper moon, basically at a very tear-jerking moment towards the end of the movie, leaves that photo in the truck for him to see, and God, if that doesn't jerk your tears, I don't know what will. Then of course, he's on the road, truck kind of breaks down, dirt road, sees in the rearview mirror, Addie ain't having it at the family house, although, the family house looks to be a wonderful place, but it's, she got used to being on the road with Ryan O'Neal's character, and it's just kind of like she'd rather just live that life or whatever. And like I say, there's obviously the viewer understands that there's a possibility, and I would probably lean more towards the fact that possibly within the confines of the story, the movie and the story of the movie, that, the character of Addie is in fact the daughter of the character that Ryan O'Neal plays. As a viewer, that's the stance I take on that issue. So if I can spoil the end of the movie, which I'm sure a lot of people won't mind, this being a movie that's nearly 50 years old and probably a movie a lot of people don't care if I spoil, it's kind of a happy, bittersweet ending where they're reunited again, kind of, at the very same spot that they were in at the beginning of the movie. It's like downtrodden. They get up to maybe a little more of a higher place financially, end up taking too big of a gamble risk, end up losing everything, and they're back to square one. But having this strong kind of bond that they formed over the weeks that they were together for the course of the movie, I don't know if it's days or weeks, I don't know, they don't really let it be known. But that's the gist of the movie. Before I end the review, I just want to say, you know, ever since I was a kid and really exposed to movies like period movies or the idea of the early 20th century, I've always taken a fancy to the early 20th century. Maybe some of the first movies I can remember being exposed to it were like the movie Christmas Story, obviously movies like Dick Tracy, Rocketeer, things like that when they came out. Discovering, when I was 14, I discovered the movie Bonnie and Clyde. So when I was like 13, 14 years old, I was really discovering all of this, you know, this era of the early, you know, the first half of the 20th century, and getting into old-time radio shows and old movies, and movies that, you know, if they weren't actually made back in that time, movies like Bonnie and Clyde or Paper Moon, that are more recent movies that are, you know, basically period movies, if you will, that take place back in that era. This movie pulls that off in spades. The whole period aspect of it being shot in black and white is something that is even more cool, as cool as, like, I don't know, Bonnie and Clyde is in its 60s color or whatever. I do think the black and white aspect of this movie really helps to really solidify the fact that it really definitely takes place in that era. It's pretty much looks exactly like a movie from that era, with the exception, of course, is, you know, the Peter Bogdanovich uses more wide lenses, and there's a lot more wide lens use in this movie than you'd see in the era that it actually takes place in, unless it's like an Orson Welles movie, of course. But with the exception of like the wide lenses and some of the long takes and stuff like that, extended long takes of scenes that just sometimes happen in, you know, or a great part of scenes that just happen in one extended take and stuff like that. It, with the exception of those elements, it obviously being shot in black and white really resembles, you know, the period aspect of the movie is really pulled off in spades in this movie. And, you know, the music, you know, the old music that's featured within the movie and stuff like that is just so cool. And the character of Addie, you know, carries around this radio, so whenever they're staying at a hotel room or whatever, she's got it plugged in with radio shows or old music playing in the radio. Of course, it's not old music in the confines of the movie, but if you're watching it when the movie came out or years after, it's quote-unquote old music, but a very, very faithful, you know, representation of the time it takes place in. A very, very just simple, but yet, like, you know, heartwarming and tear-jerking kind of movie. Even though it does that thing where it's kind of like, you know, or that whole aspect in the movie where they kind of collude to get rid of the Madeline Kahn character, although that's, like, for me, it's like not necessarily that interesting upon repeat viewings. I'll still go 4 stars out of 4 stars for Paper Moon. It's definitely a movie that its strengths definitely tower over its, you know, few perceived non-so-strong points of the movie. It's a really, really fun, just low-key movie that, you know, come to think of it, if it is on Blu-ray, which I would imagine it is, perhaps it's something that I should pick up. Maybe I don't need it. Who the hell knows? I'm trying to save money these days and only buy things that I quote-unquote can't live without. So, you know, who the hell knows? But I guess that'll pretty much do it for my review of Paper Moon. If you like movies like this, movies that were made, you know, 70s, 80s, whatever, that are like quote-unquote period, that take place, you know, that maybe were made later and they take place in the first half of the 20th century, you haven't seen this, I'd highly recommend this movie. You'll probably love it. It's got a pretty big heart, and it's really interesting watching the real-life father-daughter team of Ryan and Tatum O'Neal just warm your hearts with whatever and whatever else. Thanks a lot for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.